let's get started. So just to introduce myself, and I recognize a few names here, but my name is Greg Shapiro. I am the admissions advisor here at Divine Mercy University for the Spiritual Direction Certificate program. I've been with the university for a couple of years now, but only this year started enrolling for SDC. Previously, I was enrolling for the psychology program. But I've really enjoyed it. I've loved working with students that have a passion for spiritual direction, and just communicating with them and understanding what is driving them to this ministry and helping them along the way. So with that, I want to introduce my co-guest host, however we're going to give that title to you, Father Simon. So Father Simon, if you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you, Greg. It's a blessing to be here this morning. It's just after 8 o'clock Pacific time. I'm coming from Northern California. I live in San Jose, California, or Silicon Valley, as some people refer it. And my name is Father Simon Devereux. I'm a professed member of the Legionaries of Christ. I'm a Catholic priest, and delighted to be here with you this morning to talk about the Spiritual Direction Certificate.
Great. Well, I appreciate you being here. It's always a blessing just having active students, just sharing how their experience has been and giving a little bit more clarity to those that are looking into this sort of program for them. So with that said, again, I'm going to just highlight to the new guests that if any questions come up as we're covering information, go ahead and drop that into the chat or the Q&A section. I promise you we'll get to that, and we'll just go from there. So Father Simon, I'd love to start by asking you a few questions. You're now coming toward the end of the whole program. So overall, what has been your experience how's the experience been for you for the SDC program?
Yeah, thank you, Greg, for that question. I mean, it's been incredible. It's been such a blessing, so many blessings. And I think it'd be nice. Let's maybe frame this in prayer. Yeah. What do you think before we kind of do a deep dive? Just invoke the Holy Spirit. Yeah, let's do that. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit, you are welcome. Thank you for this renewal of the church, which you are breathing into the members of your body throughout the whole world. And we praise you for this flame of love and light, which you have given to Divine Mercy University, and in particular for this army of spiritual directors, lay and religious, consecrated priests who are responding to your call to be the listening ear for your people, to help people become saints. So we praise you and we thank you for this opportunity to remember the blessings and to share the great news of what's going on in Divine Mercy University. We ask this through the intercession of Saint Dymphna. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Greg, I think one of the blessings of the program is to really be more and more rooted in prayer. And to answer your question, so many blessings. Goodness me. I mean, where to begin? I think I got into the program kind of haphazardly. Yeah. I think it was a fruit of the pandemic, actually. You know, back in beginning of March 2020, we were all kind of grounded. Yeah, couldn't go out, shelter in place and all of that. And so I live with 7 other legionary priests in our home here in San Jose. And we started to do live stream masses. Yeah. We couldn't go out And so we started doing, masses, and then we even started giving like conferences once a week, just like 2 or 3 of us. And so that was fun, and kind of opened my eyes to the world of this, of Zoom and the virtual world, and how you just couldn't contain the Holy Spirit, right? I mean, he was coming up with all kinds of initiatives. So I think one thing led to another. I think on a personal level, the pandemic was a blessing, because it was kind of a reset. I don't know how it was for you, Greg, but I started to eat better. I started to, get into shape, do more exercise. And then I thought, well, I'm feeling a bit flabby intellectually, to be honest. After 10 years since my ordination, I was really feeling like, it'd be good to get back into some studies. And so that was kind of the beginning of eventually landing in the spiritual direction certificate. So,
Wow.
There you go.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, that sort of experience a couple of years ago caused for them to sort of reassess sort of where they were at their lives. For me, I got married right at the peak of the pandemic, so it was brand new, but it was it was something that my wife and I just sort of experienced together, and but that makes sense that something like that kind of made you rethink, what should I do at this point to, like you said, you were feeling intellectually flabby, and so this program was sort of a source for you to rebuild that strength and add more so to your vocation.
Yeah, exactly. I had heard about it through a confrere, Father Peter Hopkins, who had studied the MSP, the Masters of Science in Psychology at Divine Mercy University, and he was raving about it. This was pre-pandemic, 2018. I was living in New York at the time, and he passed through. And so I kind of put that back in the back of my head, saying, yeah, one day I'd like to do that. And end of October 2018, I was transferred from the East Coast to the West Coast. And then, like I said, I was here for a year, and then the pandemic hit. So I looked into the MSP program, but it seemed for me just to be a little bit more than I was looking for at that particular time. And then don't remember exactly how I heard about the spiritual direction certificate, but when I learned about it, it sounded like a much better fit for me in terms of the time commitment. And also the work I do. I work with young adults here in the Valley. And so I was starting to do a little bit of spiritual direction. And I thought, that sounds like a good fit. Yeah. I'd done a course in YouTubing around that time as well. I thought able God was calling me to do that, because some people had said, you do well on the camera. And so I went through an online program and discerned that wasn't for me, although I did learn some interesting things. It's kind of ironic now how God actually led me in kind of the opposite direction. Or, YouTube is like, you're kind of so out there, and your whole life becomes, transparent to everybody. Whereas now I'm doing more and more spiritual direction, which is really so hidden and confidential and private and sacred. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of gone from one end of the spectrum to the other. It's funny how God works in those ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. That's great. So what have you found to be the most helpful for you about this program within your ministry as a priest?
Well, I think I found my ministry. I was sent out here by my congregation to do vocational promotion and be a point of reference for anyone in the area who wanted to discern with the Legion. and I still continue to do that. But when I started the spiritual direction certificate, particularly when I went to the residency, so for our listeners who are not familiar, it's mostly an online course, which you can do at your own pace, pretty much. I mean, you have like these 2-month semesters, and then you have a 2 months break, and then 2 months on. But when the third semester, you do this, what they call a residency. It's you've got it here, Greg. That's great. It's 4-day on-site there at Divine Mercy University in Northern Virginia. Greg, when I went there, I said, I've come home. This is my home. These are my people. And as we started doing a lot of role playing, which we can get into later if you want, I realized, gosh, this is what I love. I really felt like God, in a sense, made me for this. And so I was just so moved and so grateful that, at 42 years of age, in a sense, discovering my vocation within, my priestly vocation. So that's been a source of great, great joy. And God is, he's so wonderful that as I've now been learning these skills, God's been sending people for me to help without even me doing anything. They just seem to arrive. And so how it's helped my ministry, as I said, I think it's become my ministry. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And then with the vocation piece as well, I mean, vocation counseling is a bit different from spiritual direction, but there's a lot of overlap, obviously. So all the listening skills that we're taught, that's been incredibly helpful, not only for my ministry, but for my community life too, and my prayer life too, Greg. Learning how to listen, learning how to share with God, every morning, having an hour, we have an hour of personal prayer time. And that is just, I feel like I'm flourishing.
Yeah. That's excellent. And, it's interesting because every time I have conversations with current students or former students that have graduated, I typically ask them, what surprised you about the program? What did you get out of it that you weren't expecting, but turned out to be a real fruits in your life and within your activity in this ministry? Some answers I've gotten, and it's something I didn't think about, but it makes a lot of sense. For some of them, they've said, my relationship with my own spiritual director has really flourished more, just because they've now gotten a better sense of what the spiritual director that they're working with has been asking them, or what they're putting on the table to help guide them closer to God. And so they're now getting an even deeper sense of how do we actually go about spiritual direction, but even from the perspective of the directee. So I thought that was just excellent hearing this from the students, and it's one of those unforeseen fruits that happens for a lot of them, but turns out to be a great benefit.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. And in my own case, I felt called to look for a new spiritual director, because I realized that although I had been blessed with very holy spiritual directors, legionaries, and I got a lot of good advice, I started to realize they weren't trained really, well, it's particularly not trained in the evocative contemplative method that's used really by Divine Mercy University in the Spiritual Direction Certificate. And I found that as we started to do these role plays, beginning in the third semester, I was getting so much out of those role plays where, yeah, you kind of make things up, right? But at the end, you're really talking about experiences that you've had or things that you're living. And I was getting so much out of those role plays, Greg. And I started to think, wow. And I started to realize my spiritual director, holy man, and I got a lot of God worked through him without a doubt. But I was really feeling called to someone who could help me go deeper, and someone who had been trained in the listening to really help me understand what God was doing in my life. And so I prayed about it, and I ended up with a lay woman, someone who's been doing spiritual direction for decades, kind of a grandmother figure. But the first time we spoke, I said, I've never met anyone who listened so well. It was I felt like a thirsty man in a desert and coming upon an oasis and just being plunged into that cool, refreshing water. I said, I want more of that. So I asked if she would be my spiritual director. And since January of this year, I've been blessed. And yeah, God has a timing for everything, right? And so I guess I was ready for that. But yeah, that's been another wonderful surprise, Greg, and a blessing from this course at Divine Mercy University.
That's wonderful. And I want to get back to the residencies in a moment, but since you had mentioned your just the fact that going through this, you had a little bit more clarity of where you needed to go as a directee. I would love to speak a little bit more about that, because you had mentioned how your spiritual director is a lay woman. And I think for many folks that are looking into this, but primarily speaking about the lay people that are being called to this, now and then they'll express a little bit of hesitancy, because they might think, should I be doing this? I'm not a consecrated person. I'm not a priest. I'm not a religious. Is this actually, could I be interfering with God's will for me? And I always remind them how this is a ministry that God could call anyone to. This isn't reserved strictly for one type of vocation, but he does call all sorts of people. And part of that's because they can speak from their own experience as being a single lay person, or being a married lay person, or whatever it may be. But I'd love to hear a little bit from you, what you would maybe perhaps say to those people that are concerned. Could this be, when they ask themselves, is this something that I could be pursuing wrongfully, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, thank you for that, Greg. When I began my religious life, I was under the impression that all priests were spiritual directors, or should be spiritual directors. But I came to realize relatively recently, a friend of mine, we joined together, and we were walking, he came to visit, and we were walking on the coast, and he said, you know what, I really love teaching. I love teaching, and I love writing books. That's my thing. When someone comes to me and wants to have a long-term relationship, I'm like, it's really not my cup of tea. Right? Yeah, I can do the one-off. If you've got a specific problem, I can help you with that. And I was like, oh, okay. So it started to make me think that not all priests are given that charism of being a spiritual director. And then when I met this lay woman, who's now my spiritual director, it was so clear. It's like, well, she has that charism, she has that gift, she has that calling. And that was confirmed in spades when I went to the residency. And, I think 80-90% of the folks there were lay people, mostly women. though I think many men are called to it as well. And I saw, well, even before I went to the residency, doing these triads, these mock sessions, many of these people, my classmates, it was so clear they had the gift of spiritual direction. And so it also ties in, maybe some people are wondering, what is my charism? And I heard this explained quite well, that there's 3 indications for what might be the charism that you have, right? We're all called to holiness, right? That's the first gift, the first vocation. And then the second is a particular state in life. You got married during the pandemic, okay. But then what's your personal vocation? What's your charism? And so there's 3 indicators that of a charism. One is other people mention it. Other people say, oh, you're really good at that, or have you ever considered doing this? Secondly, it's something that comes very easily to you, like you don't even think about it really. Some people, I have a priest friend who's just a natural administrator. I mean, the way he's able to juggle fundraising and expenses and employees, and it's like, I couldn't do that in a million years. But for him, it's like water off a duck's back, or it's just the air he breathes. Yeah. And then thirdly, the fruits are supernatural, because they're not your skills. Skills can help, but essentially it's a charism. You become a channel of God's grace. Yeah. So the fruits are supernatural. They don't really correspond to the human instrument. Yeah. So you were pointing out that some lay people, I think the priests are the natural go-tos, right? People open up to us very readily. Yeah. But I think we're realizing there's so few priests. Yeah. And priests have many obligations and duties, particularly parish priests. I think, historically religious priests have been more go-tos for spiritual direction. But not all priests have that charism, and many lay people do. I have a friend, I was giving him spiritual direction, but then we became very close, and we both realized, and he asked me first, he said, you know what, I think I really want to foster this friendship. And so I need a new spiritual director. Can you help me? And he said, I would like a woman to be my spiritual director. He's married, happily married. And he said, I really feel like an older woman would be, at this point in my life, something good. So I was able to connect him with a classmate. And so I think it's very exciting for the church, because now there's a lot more possibilities for people to find spiritual directors. Because it's a big commitment. Meeting with someone once a month for an hour, could be for years and years. Yeah, it's a big commitment.
Yeah, and multiple directees as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think it's very hopeful. When I went to the residency and I started meeting these wonderful people from all over the country, I got so excited because, Greg, I was thinking they're going to be forming saints. Yeah, they're going to be churning out Teresa of Avila and Joan of Arc and Carlos Acutis. I mean, this is going to be so wonderful for the church.
Yeah, and even fostering their own holiness as they're doing this. They're getting a better sense of God's mission for them and growing even deeper into it. So that's one of the other benefits to this sort of ministry.
Greg, I mean, giving spiritual direction is so humbling. It's so beautiful. It's so sacred. And to see how people are hearing God, responding to God, and discovering God in the midst of really difficult situations is just, it's awe-inspiring. It really is. It's such a gift.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Mm.
So, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the residencies too, because it sounds like this has been almost I don't want to say that the whole climax of the program, but perhaps it was for you, because this really is a point where students, they come together, they get to know each other virtually through the online format, using Canvas, but then they actually get to see each other face to face for the first time, and they get to say, oh, here you are in front of me, we've been communicating this whole time,
Yeah.
now we get to actually do this together. But what's so great about this is that, and it sounds like this is what you were alluding to, how everything that you've been learning, all of the content in the courses and all the reading material has been sort of leading up to this moment where physically you get to now, in person, you get to now put into practice these skills, and everything that you've been really diving into in these mock spiritual direction sessions through role playing and getting to hear the lectures on campus. So, I mean, overall, it sounds like I think you already said it pretty well, but just generally speaking, how have the residencies been for you as a student, and how has this really allowed you to continue on through the program after you've completed the residencies?
Yeah, I think the takeaway is that you can't do this alone. You can't be a spiritual director alone. That we all joined this program, and then we got to know each other virtually. As you said, we arrived to campus, and there was an immediate bond because we were really stepping outside of the comfort zone big time. It was challenging when you sit down and you pretend you're a directee and you have a professor there and a couple of other classmates, and you're sharing, even though it's meant to be like kind of made up in a sense. But there were tears because things come up, you just can't help it. And the method that Divine Mercy University uses of this contemplative evocative is so powerful that it really puts you in contact with God. So we really bonded very quickly, and that's continued. And now post, kind of as I get to the end of the certificate, I have one semester to go. Now we continue to meet in small groups to encourage each other, to bounce ideas or situations that we've experienced in spiritual direction. Obviously, maintaining all the confidentiality, but the sense that you don't want to do this alone. And the others, they're so inspiring. They're holy people who are trying and have this gift. And it was fun, Greg. We had a lot of laughs, some tears, but it really became a family, and we continue to support each other and pray for each other. And it wasn't for everyone too. I mean, it was clear in the residency that there were some there who had other gifts. Yeah. But they were still benefiting a lot. God wanted them there, and they were giving their best. So, I would really encourage anyone who does feel moved to do the course to do it. Whether or not ultimately you end up discerning that is your charism, you just get so much out of it. And the listening skills help in every relationship that we have, whether it's with God or our spouse, the people that we live and work with. So yeah, the residency was really beautiful. And so helpful to have the professors right there, Greg. I mean, Dr. Musselwhite, Father Prasudi, Father Pietro Paoli, and others. It was great just to listen to them and to have them, in real time give you feedback as you were directing in these sessions, and then to hang out with them during the meals and after class and pray with them. That was very helpful.
Yeah, great. That's very good. And I also appreciate how you had mentioned that there are some people that go through the program and they get more clarity on maybe where they should be going in what God's calling them to. And sometimes they go into the program and they think that this is actually what God is calling them to, and which is fine. Sometimes it takes a little bit of trial and error to figure out what God is saying to us. And many times they'll get a little bit more clarity. Oh, this isn't really what I'm meant to be doing. I should actually be doing this. Maybe I should be teaching rather than being a spiritual director. So, I even want to highlight very quickly, and let me scroll up, because these are the courses that students take. But, the first three courses are mostly designed. I mean, there's a lot of great content in here, and you get a sense of human development, your second course, and how it's going to relate within the context of spiritual direction. But the first three courses are also designed to help those who are still in their discernment process of what their ministry should be. And so I always encourage people that if they really believe that spiritual direction is the ministry that they're called to, but they're still trying to be sure of that, the first three courses can really help in providing that clarity. But not only that, it's not like they're taking it and it's all for naught. These are skills, and this is education that will apply into different sorts of ministries. So whether you come to realize that you're actually meant to be a catechist, or maybe working within parish counseling outside of spiritual direction, or whatever it may be, what you're learning really will overlap into these other sorts of directions. So something I like to highlight to people, many times they just need a little bit more clarity on, is this going to benefit them only in spiritual direction, or can it carry over? And the first three courses are especially designed for that.
Yeah, nothing's wasted, Greg. I mean, like I told you at the beginning, I did it was a 2 months, oh no, I think 1 month course in YouTubing. And, at the end of it, it was very clear this was not for me, but I got a lot out of it. Yeah. And it actually helped me discern, take another step in that discernment. So yeah, I would, I think many priests have been encouraged to take this course, and I would say absolutely do it. Ultimately, it may not be your charism, but you will get so much out of it for your own spiritual life and these listening skills and the discernment.
Yeah, great, very good. And I like how you put that. Nothing's wasted. Just very, very simply put, but very accurate to that. So good. Just looking at the time, what I'd like to do is just share a little bit more about what to expect in the program. All of the little details of the time commitment, and you had mentioned that there are these breaks between the courses, and I want to go a little bit more into that, especially because I think for many people that can be a deciding factor. Can they commit the time? So I'm just going to take a moment to share a little bit more about this. And Father Simon, again, if you have any thoughts or anything that you'd like to contribute as I'm doing this, please, I'd love to hear just from your own experience as a student. So for all of the students that are considering this, the first thing I'll mention, as we showed below, there are 6 courses that every student takes, and they take courses one at a time. So you're not taking multiples at a time. It's really paced in a sort of in a breathable way. There's a lot of breathing room between the courses that you're taking. But students are taking them one at a time, and they're all done online, of course. But not only that, they're also done primarily asynchronously. So in other words, I think for a lot of people, they think of an online program as being a collection of students, the cohort, logging into Zoom at 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever the time may be. And that's not so much that. I believe there's some a few moments in the program where there's some group work, and so the students do communicate with each other on when to do those, but that's a little bit more rare. The majority of it would be the students logging into discussion boards through the platform we use is Canvas, which I found to be the most user-friendly of my experiences with online education. But they're logging in through discussion boards. There are the reading materials, the modules that they'll have access to. And so this makes it much more accessible to those that maybe have a busy home life or busy work life or busy work within ministry. And so that's one of the other reasons why we offer these courses online and asynchronously. But along with that, we talked about the few face-to-face components. One would be the residencies. And I'll talk a little bit more on that once I jump back to the other slide, but they happen twice in the program and they're spaced apart. And we make sure that the students know months in advance when they will take place. But the other face-to-face component would be the practicum hours. And the practicum is really sort of this is what it all leads up to. This is where you as a student, as you're completing your last two courses, will begin working with directees. You'll be working as a spiritual director, whether it's within your parish or within your apostolate or just others within your diocese, and offering that direction and logging those hours with a supervisor, which will be one of your instructors. So these two parts would be done, of course, face-to-face, while all the courses are done online. Father Simon, if I may actually ask, since I had mentioned the practicum, what has been your experience now that you're about to jump into your last course in January? So what has been your experience once you've actually begun your practicum hours?
My experience of the practicum is, well, maybe we could explain that, right? So the practicum is where you start to give spiritual direction, and then you log those hours, because you can't graduate the program until you've completed, I think, 60 hours of spiritual direction. And as part of that, we enter once a month into what's called a supervision. It's more like a spiritual director circle, where you come in to a Zoom meeting, and one of the group would take turns to present part of a spiritual direction that we've had, again, maintaining all the confidentiality and changing names and so forth. But that's been really helpful to just to learn to listen to others. Not so much about what the directee says, but it's more about how you react as a spiritual director, what's going on inside of you. Because, you know, we all have feelings and thoughts, and we can be provoked. And so it really helps. It's helped me to learn more and more in real time, having others reflect on how I've handled a situation, and then learning from others as they share their experiences. It's been wonderfully helpful. And in fact, I'll continue to do that, you know, post graduation, because it's just a no-brainer that, you know, you can't do this alone. And to have a group where you can come in and just check in and bounce difficult situations off, or just share the joy as well, is it's not, I guess, as we were explained, that there's no governing body for spiritual directors out there, but it seems like a very best ethical practice that at least Divine Mercy University highly encourages that we continue these spiritual director circles or supervision as we continue in our ministry, just like any counselor would. I think in counseling there is a requirement to do that, but I will continue to do that.
Yeah, great, very good. And I'll also mention that because you're right, that every student must complete 60 hours logged of their practicum, but sometimes they'll ask, what if it's taking me a little bit more time because I only have one directee? We can always, as a university, extend it a little bit more for you. So I don't want you to feel like there's this clock that's ticking so loudly that it must be done precisely at a certain point. As a university, we will accommodate. We're happy to be a little bit more flexible to that. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that sort of thing either.
Mm-hmm.
Great, very good. And again, I'll just highlight the different courses that students take. And these are all 6 of them, and they're also sequential. So you're taking them in this order. So of course, there's ongoing conversion, deepening discipleship, and the foundations of spiritual direction. The second course is human development for spiritual direction. The third course is relating skills for spiritual direction. And this is where the first residency falls, and that happens during week 7. So that's about, I believe, roughly 10 months from the whole start of the program if you're taking them without any sort of break. So again, there's a lot of space between when you start and when the residencies fall. And again, we make sure that students know well in advance when they happen so they can let their employers or their families know. So the fourth course is discernment and spiritual growth theory and practice. The 5th one is advanced spiritual direction skills and practicum. And again, this is where the second residency will happen, and that will happen during week 2. And this is a launch into your practicum hours. So this is actually where those practicum hours will begin. And then the last course is advanced prayer and situations. So again, they happen in this order. And for the guests here, if you're curious about a little bit more about what each of these entail, we have the course descriptions on our website. You're more than welcome to view that just to get a good sense of the content.
Great. Maybe I can highlight one thing too as well is the cost. I have a feeling the Divine Mercy program is of all the spiritual direction programs out there, which I think there are not an insignificant number, maybe a dozen in the United States. I have a feeling that the DMU course is probably on the more expensive side. But as a student, I would really, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think what the Divine Mercy University Spiritual Direction Certificate brings to the table is it's coming out of this Divine Mercy University, which started as a school of psychology, which is integrating the Catholic understanding of the human person with all these wonderful new insights into psychology and how our psychology works. And then now there's also a school of counseling. So the Divine Mercy Spiritual Direction Certificate's coming out of that. So there is a wonderful foundation that we receive from even our professors who are trained psychologists, who are trained counselors, who are priests. So it's, I think, a very complete program. There's a lot of spiritual theology, but there's this really wonderful gift of the understanding of the human person, which is a great gift that we've received from the growth in the psychological sciences, but obviously coming from a Christian understanding, a Christian anthropology. And so I know there's scholarships available for the course. I mean, I asked friends and family to help me get through this course. Obviously, I'm not paid. I don't have my own money, but it was actually a wonderful way for people to help my ministry, to give to my studies. And so, yeah, just to say it was definitely worth the money.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up too, because you're right. There are a fair amount of spiritual direction programs out there, and some of them are maybe a little bit less in the as far as price range, but this program is very unique. And so if you're looking for something that's going to have a little bit more depth and also provide that integrative component of giving the students a foundational understanding of the human mind, but how that's going to relate in the context of spiritual direction, that's something that we are offering and we're equipping the spiritual directors into doing once they go into this ministry. And it's a very powerful thing to have, especially if, imagine, and this happens sometimes, where spiritual directors working with someone that has gone through some sort of intense trauma and crisis in his life, and having the ability to even speak to that, and of course not as a therapist, because spiritual direction is not therapy, but still having the ability to speak to that as the spiritual director can be challenging. But we are really, the goal is to equip our students into having the ability to do that, and then if necessary, properly refer them to a licensed professional if that's needed, because of the insight that you've gotten in the program, because you have gotten a little bit more clarity on psychology and how it's going to affect you in this sort of ministry and working with them. So yeah, I think you put it very well. This really is a unique program. There are a lot of great spiritual direction programs out there, but for those that want something with that component, that integrative component, also including Ignatian spirituality, Franciscan spirituality, St. John of the Cross, this is something that we're offering all of the students as they go through this. Great, very good. Let's see. We had talked about the courses. I'll also mention very quickly about the residencies, and we went into great detail of this, but the residencies do happen on campus. We're located in Sterling, Virginia, so that's about a 45-minute drive outside of DC. But for students that fly in, they're flying in through Dulles, and Dulles is about a 5-minute drive from the campus. It's very close. You're not having to jump on the highway to get to campus. It's right around the corner. And then also students are lodged next door to Marriott Hotel. I believe it's actually close enough that some of the students will just walk from the hotel to the campus if they prefer to do that.
Oh, yeah. In fact, Greg, arriving to Dulles Airport, we just hopped on a shuttle. We got taken straight to the hotel, just 5 minutes away. Yeah, and then each morning we would just walk over. It was about a 5-minute walk to the DMU University. So it was very easy in that sense.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of them say how thankful they are for, just that convenience of everything being so close together. So along with that, let's see, the residencies happen from, it officially launches on a Wednesday evening, but that's more of a social event where the students are just gathering together with the instructors. We host dinner here. They cover very quickly what's to expect between Thursday and Sunday. Thursday morning is when everything officially launches, where you have your lectures and your group sessions. And then that goes into Sunday around lunchtime. And we offer the sacraments here. Mass is always offered every day. And again, this is just a great experience for the students to finally get together and do this at the same time. And one last thing about the residencies, because this is a common question that people have. what if I can't make it because there's an event going on? Or what if the first residency is going to happen when I have a wedding to go to? Or what if an emergency happens and I just can't make it? That's fine. Life happens. Things that we celebrate happen, things that are difficult happen, and we need to attend to those. And we understand that students get a leave of absence if they want to. They can, in fact, every student has 3 leave of absences they can use. And so if a residency is going to happen at a point where, you just won't be able to make that because of a more important pressing matter, then you can certainly use a leave of absence and pause the program. And then when you're ready to jump back into it, you can certainly get reinstated and move on when you're ready.
Yeah, I found the flexibility very helpful. I had a family emergency pop up. I had already had my tickets for the second residency, and I was able to postpone that semester. I had to travel back home to New Zealand, and actually my mother got very sick, and I was able to spend a week with her before she passed. And all the folks who were at the residency, my friends, they were praying, and I was keeping them up to date. So I felt very supported by that. And then the administration was very supportive and allowed me to take that leave of absence. And I found too, Greg, that God's timing is perfect. That when I'm in session, I find the time, I have the time. When I'm not studying, when there's 2-month break, I'm thinking, how did I ever study? Because there's always so much going on, right? But God is good. And even when I had to travel, it was amazing how things always worked out. I always had that gap to read. And it pushed me too. Even, sometimes I was on the plane, I was, reading away there. But it was good. It really, it pushed me in a good way. And God was behind the whole thing too, making things happen.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. It also just speaks to the community that people gain when they're active in this program with their cohort. So very good. So I also want to share very quickly the time commitment, the time frame of the program. So it's a 2-year program in total. And as I mentioned earlier, students are taking 1 course at a time, so 1 course per term. And usually, and this is not set in stone, but as far as coursework or time that they're putting in per week, usually it's somewhere between 6 to 9 hours, maybe 7 to 10. It could vary based on the student, their learning style, and that sort of thing. It could also depend on the course. Some of the information might be familiar to you. You might be able to breeze through that. There might be other courses where it might be a little bit more dense or brand new information. But generally speaking, I would say if you're looking into this program, to look at your own schedule, see if you could commit around 9 hours per week. If that would be doable for you, if there's any sort of flexibility in your schedule that would permit that. And if so, then, and this is something that you're called to, then I'd be happy to go a little bit more deeper with you on a one-on-one. Now, along with that, we had mentioned that there is breathing room between the courses. There are breaks. So the pattern goes that students take 1 8-week course, and then they jump into a break. And that break happens for about 8, 9, 10 weeks, depending on where we are on the academic calendar. But this does give some, again, some breathing room. These breaks happen during major holidays. So during Holy Week, during Christmas week, during Thanksgiving, also during the summer from July until August, there's going to be some downtime. But this also serves as a good point for students to replenish their funds. So you're not having to pay course by course nonstop for the courses that you're taking, but these breaks will give you a chance to really build back the expenses as you're going through this, since it's a pay-as-you-go program.
There's a question there in the chat. Great.
Yeah. So let's see. I'd be happy to answer that. So Dan says, it sounds like Father is able to do spiritual direction without yet completing the course and receiving his certificate. Is that correct? Yeah, I mean, in fact, let me say this, spiritual direction itself is not a ministry where you have to apply for certification the same way that a counselor needs to apply for licensure. So there's no sort of officiality in that sense where you have to apply through the diocese or through a parish. In this case, once you complete the program, what you're doing is earning a certificate of completion, but it shows the credentials that you know how to proceed as a spiritual director. So we have people that go into this program that are active spiritual directors, but they go into this because they want more formal training. But also, again, before you even graduate, you do have your practicum. So that's actually a required part where you will be active as a spiritual director before completing the program, and as a tool to get you into the completion stage.
That's right, Greg. From the 500, so the fifth term, the fifth of 6 terms of the certificate, that's when we're really encouraged to start offering spiritual direction. Although, like you say, I mean, I was already giving spiritual direction beforehand, although I'm kind of almost ashamed of, not ashamed, I'm sure God worked through me, but now knowing, learning so much about what it truly is, I'm almost a bit embarrassed. But yes, and like you say, there's no governing body, and people are probably already approaching you, asking for advice or looking for counsel. And so, but yeah, like in terms of the spiritual direction certificate, from the 5th term on, that's when we're really encouraged. And like I said, that's when God started really sending people to me to help. So this really is a God thing. I had some classmates who got all anxious and wanted to make business cards and, I'm a spiritual director. But from what I remember in the course and in my experience is that you don't need to worry about that. God will send you the people he wants to send you. You don't need to be going advertising.
Yeah, good.
Does that help, Dan? Yeah, okay, he says thank you.
Yes, great question, Dan. So we're coming to the top of the hour. I want to make sure I'm being sensitive to everyone's time, but I'd love to open up the floor for any other questions. So as I'm opening up the floor, I'll just share very quickly the cost as well. And so as you're seeing in front of you, and by the way, I do want to highlight that there is room to bring the cost per course down. But the cost as you're seeing it in front of you is $778 per course, and each residency is $1,000. And that $1,000 will cover your lodging, it'll cover most of your meals, it'll cover your materials. So I believe the only thing that the students are responsible for would be their travel and 3 dinners while they're here for the residencies. But everything else is covered there. As far as the cost per course, it can be reduced if you work in ministry, and by that I mean, even if you're a volunteer with your parish, so you don't have to be a consecrated person, a priest or anything like that. Though if you are, that's room to bring the costs down. But even if you are a parishioner and you're in good standing with your parish, we can bring the cost down by 10%. So that would bring it down to about $700. So if that's you, if you fit into that, let me know, and we can discuss how we can move forward in reducing the costs for you.
And again, Greg, I would just say, if God really wants this, like he'll provide. Because you're looking at all up, it's like $10,000 to do the course. And
I'd say less than that, probably about 6.5. Looking at it, I mean, depending on,
Well, you
aside
got
from the,
courses, yeah, maybe a little bit less, yeah. But yeah, God.
oh, Father Simon, it looks like you froze. Okay. Sorry, Father Simon, it looks like you froze. I'm gonna wait a moment. Just to make sure. Okay. Okay. Well, Father Simon, it looks like you froze there in the middle of what you were saying. Hopefully you'll jump back in. But and I don't know if you can hear me right now, but yeah, it looks like he's going to jump back in. But I'll share for everybody that's here. We do have a start date coming up for January 11th. And so that's going to be our spring term. We're still enrolling for that. There's still time to apply. I would suggest submitting an application because it will at the very least reserve a seat for you for the next cohort. So I would do that sooner than later. If it turns out we need to defer you, that's fine. We can do that. And we even have a code for the application form. Usually it's $25, but we can waive it for you. So there's a code in the bottom red screen. Father Simon's return. Great, very good.
Yeah,
Froze there.
I know the internet dropped here in Silicon Valley.
Go figure. Good. And you were in the middle of something. Was there any? I just wanted to give you a chance to finish your thought for everyone.
Oh yes, thank you. What I was just saying, you know, it's a beautiful ministry of spiritual direction. Obviously, we're not doing it for the money. I mean, I don't charge. If people want to help me out with a stipend, that's certainly accepted. So I really think it's a God thing, Greg. And obviously, we need to pay the professors and the facility, but God provides for sure. Yeah. So I wouldn't let the fees be a deterrent to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, for everyone that's here and that will see this, because I know that could be a deciding factor. Is this affordable? Will this can this be doable? Have a conversation with me. I'm happy to discuss what this will actually look like course by course. I'd love to hear about what sort of obstacles that you could be going into. Share as much as you're comfortable sharing regarding the finances. But again, this is something that can be done. So yeah. So we are about 5 minutes past the hour, so we went a little bit further than intended. But again, I'll just share that the next start date is January 11th. If you're interested in applying, I'd be happy to walk you through that process. It's much shorter than you might think, even though you're applying into a university. This application process is very short and can be done in a very short period of time. So, Father Simon, thank you so much for being here. It's really been a blessing just getting your view on what it looked like for you as a student and sharing that with everyone.
Thank you, Greg. For me, it's been a blessing too, just to remember and bring to the heart all these wonderful blessings. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I really encourage those who are discerning whether to begin the spiritual direction certificate to be courageous and certainly count on our prayers, on my prayers, and I'm sure Greg, you'll be praying for them too. So
Yes.
thank you again.
Yes.
And thank you for all you do there at Divine Mercy University.
Thank you. Thank you for your vocation. All right. Take care, everyone. God bless.